Nancy. Oh good, this works really well. Well, good morning everybody. I'm excited because Albert and Nancy told me I have an hour and a half this morning. Okay, I guess actually it was more like about 30 minutes. I'd like to start off with a cautionary tale as we talk about the F word, and you all probably figured out right now I'm not talking about the F word that you can't say on TV. Okay? In real estate, the word that we're much more worried about is an F word that's spelled F-R-A-U-D, and much more damaging, right? We can get embarrassed if we say the other F word, and our wives might get mad at us, or our kids or our minister might be very disappointed in us, but it's not as bad as if the word fraud is connected to your name. But before I talk about how that can be connected to your name, what I would first like to do is give you a cautionary tale of how realtors and brokers in particular can fall victim yourselves to very serious financial fraud. Now, I happen to be a broker myself. I don't practice. I got the license so that I could, like you, be members of CAR and participate at the meetings 3 times a year. But one of the things as a lawyer that happens is you get solicitations all the time from people who want you to do legal work for them. Well, realtors also sometimes get solicitations in email from people who say, well, I want to buy a piece of property, will you help me? Now that's fine, except you don't always know who the person is that contacted you, and you don't always know if they're real. I get emails every single day from people saying, would you handle a lawsuit for my corporation, which is based in Europe, Canada, Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, wherever, okay? And almost always, the emails are not actually from real people. Somebody will respond, but they're not somebody who actually is who they say they are. They're not with the company they claim they're with. And here's what happens with realtors. This has happened to a realtor not of this association. True story, just happened 6 months ago. A realtor from the Beverly Hills Greater LA Association called me up and said, I got a referral from a member of another, let's just say a neighboring association not far from here, for a client in Japan who wants to buy a condominium in Beverly Hills. And the client said they need a lawyer involved in the transaction. I got your name from somebody, would you help me out? And I said, well, of course, I'd be happy to help with the transaction. It's kind of unusual in an ordinary condominium practice for a real estate lawyer to be involved. But I said, fine. So I got the email of this person who would claim to be a businessman in Tokyo. I sent an email and a fee agreement to this person, and I didn't get any response for a while. And the next response that I got a couple of weeks later was an email saying, did you get the check? Now, I was asking for a retainer of, I think it was $5,000. And I got a check mailed to me, or dropped off actually, that purported to be for something like $130,000. Now, this was supposedly a deposit that this person was going to put down on a condo. Here's the problem. I called the selling agent who was who got me into this and said, hey, I just got this big check. I haven't done anything with it. Have you made an offer on a property? Do we have an escrow open? And the realtor said, no, we haven't started any serious negotiations with anybody. So we looked at the check. Now the check was supposed to be deposited in my trust account. You brokers, anybody heard of trust accounts? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So what happened was the check was phony. And it was actually a pretty poor forgery. It purported to be a certified check, but if you look closely at it, there were 2 or 3 indicators that it was false. My secretary, even before I saw it, caught it. And then I looked at it and, oh yeah, the serial numbers on the top don't match the serial numbers on the bottom, blah, blah, blah. So we didn't deposit it. But here's what these fraud artists hope that brokers and lawyers will do. Is the scam is they will deposit a substantial amount of, they will claim to have given you a substantial amount of money in a certified check. And the certified check is not legitimate. It's a fake. And if you just deposit it with your bank and the bank doesn't catch it, the check will sit there and it'll be on the books of your trust account for a week or so. And after about a week, most of us assume the check is cleared, right? I mean, that's normally. In fact, I had a client who does business. He's got a corporation based in Beijing. He does business around the world. He had the same issue when he received checks from Canada. And the checks, after a week, he called the bank and said, well, check's clear, and the bank person says, yeah, I guess so, everything looks good. So he went ahead and delivered 6 figures, over $100,000 of product to a company in Africa. And guess what? After about 3 or 4 weeks, it turned out all the checks were phony. And guess what happened to the money he thought was in his account? It wasn't there. His account was now short tens of thousands of dollars. Well, that's what happens with your trust account, because the scam goes like this. The client, after they give you this huge check that's far more than you told them you need for any deposit or whatever, then they're going to send you an urgent email in several days. And they're going to say, oh, please withdraw for me. I need about $40,000. And so it's far less than the amount of money you think you have in your trust account. You cut the check from your trust account back to this person for $40,000. Your check is good, right? So what happens when you find out that the money wasn't there, it's too late to cancel your check, that money's already gone, and guess what? Now your trust account is short $40,000. And then when you try to track down the identity of this person, you find out that they have no relationship with the corporation that they said they were involved with, and there's no address and nobody that you can chase to prosecute. It's a devastating fraud. And it's becoming more and more dangerous for all of us because of the amount of business that we do and the amount of referrals, first-time contacts we get from email. So the moral of the story is I don't refuse to do business with people offshore, but be very cautious. One red flag is when, if you can't connect that person to the corporation, okay, their email, they say, I'm from, this happened one time. A guy claimed to hire me from a company called Chung Woo. And Chung Woo had a website. But this guy's email was not from Chung Woo's email domain. It was from another domain. Okay? That was the first warning sign. The second warning sign was, yep, this person sent me a cashier's check for retainer dramatically beyond what I'd asked for. Third, it was a third-party check. It wasn't even from Chung Woo Corporation. It was from somebody else. Okay? And fourth, it was an obvious, horrible fraud. It was almost comical. It was so bad. But if you ignore all those warning signs and you put that money in your trust account, you cannot assume that that check has cleared the bank just because a week has gone on. If it is a non-traditional, it's a smaller business bank, it may take a while before it finally gets to the point where somebody spots that it's a forgery, there's no money there, and then the message goes back up the line to the banks. And if you've already transferred that money, it's too late for you. So, this was one story where a realtor from Beverly Hills was involved. I've not seen anybody in the San Gabriel Valley get stuck by the scam, but be very, very careful. A lot of times your instincts will tell you something's wrong. In this story, there were at least 3 or 4 indications something's a little off, right? So trust your judgment, and don't be too anxious or excited when somebody starts throwing more money at you than you asked for. That's a dead giveaway, because how do most con artists get us? They get us because of our greed. Okay, so that's the cautionary tale. Now let's get into not just your liability to be a victim of fraud. Now let's talk about the fraud issue as it applies to realtors. Now, an opening remark. I am not going to talk to you about being honest today. Why is that? Because the people that lie and cheat in any profession are not the people that come to meetings like this. Okay? They aren't. I don't have to tell you how honorable it is to be a realtor in the San Gabriel Valley, do I? I don't have to tell you what a wonderful honor it is to have your clients trust you and how important it is to have integrity and tell the truth, do I? No. My message today is about the different ways that an honest person trying to do the right thing can inadvertently wind up being exposed to a fraud lawsuit that can ruin your reputation, even though you yourself didn't mean to lie. But you made some mistakes along the way that left you exposed. So that's what I mean in the title, Integrity in the F Word. Today's message to you is that exposure to lawsuits for fraud claims can happen without any issue as to your integrity and honesty whatsoever. So let's talk about that. First of all, you all know that you're litigation magnets, right? Everything's your fault. Why every time something goes wrong in a transaction, whether it's a water heater that leaks, or a sidewalk that is discovered to have a big crack in it, or a roof that leaks in the first rain, why is it always the listing and selling agent's fault? Well, there's a reason for that. It really isn't your fault, of course. But why do your clients act like everything's your fault? Well, your clients act that way because they think you know everything. Why do they think you know everything? Well, ask yourself, how many consultants does the ordinary home purchaser consult in the average residential transaction in our area? Let's see. Do they consult a lawyer? Pretty much never. It's crazy, but they don't. Do they consult a structural engineer or an architect to judge the makeup of that? No, of course not. Do they have a forensic contractor, a civil engineer look at the soil condition? Do they have a financial advisor come in and analyze the price of the house? No. Who do they look at for pretty much everything? Financial advice, landscaping advice, advice on whether it's a good-looking house or not, the school districts, right? They look to you for everything. Now, they really shouldn't. And one of the mistakes that we in the profession make is we allow our clients to think that we know everything. And we don't know everything. But that's what sets us up as litigation magnets in the real estate field, is our clients think we know everything. And so when anything goes wrong, they think, A, we knew about it, and B, we must have covered it up because we wanted the commission and have the transaction proceed. And of course, all realtors are millionaires, right? Yeah. We're all millionaires and we all have lots of insurance, so anything goes wrong, the realtor can take the hit, right? Because I'm just a poor homeowner. So, your litigation magnets. There are three varieties of fraud, at least three that I can think of. Of course, one is the traditional fraud. That is, you make a statement or you do not make a statement that you know about, which is a material fact. You make a statement that is wrong, and you know it's wrong, or you fail to disclose something that you know that is a material fact. And a material fact in law is a fact which would have affected the buyer's decision to buy at the stated price. That's material. So if I were to tell you that that faucet, that the hot water faucet works but the left water faucet doesn't, and it turned out both faucets didn't work. Okay, a single little handle on the bathroom sink probably is not going to affect the price of the house. Okay, material facts are something more than that. But that's fraud. Okay, and we all know that. But there are a couple of other species of fraud, or cousins of fraud. And one you probably haven't heard much about is called negligent misrepresentation. Negligent misrepresentation is a cousin of fraud. And here's how it works. You make a statement to the buyer as if it were true, but you have no reasonable basis to know whether or not the statement is true or not. So I'm going to sell you a condominium in this business park. And I tell you, the buyer, that this condominium is going to quadruple in value because Tom Cruise is going to be buying a piece of property right next door, and he's putting up an amazing celebrity center. Okay? Now, you may have heard that from somebody at a party. You may believe it's true, but you have no basis to make the statement, right? Now, if the buyer buys and relies on that statement as part of their rationale, and then they find out after they close escrow, wait a minute, Tom Cruise is not buying any property next door. In fact, the city is condemning the property next door. Okay? That is a classic scenario of negligent misrepresentation. You said something significant, you believed it was true, but you had no reasonable basis to know if it was true or not. Here's another example that's more close to home. You tell a buyer, listing agent or selling agent, you tell a buyer this is a well-built home. Quality construction throughout. Craftsman quality throughout. Buyer, this house has good bones. I always love that saying. Good bones. Really? Now, let's talk for a minute about this. We're sitting in a room of a fairly modern structure. Where are the bones in this building? Do you know? What are the bones? Well, we can't see them, can we? Because they're behind drywall, they're behind paint, they're behind a suspended ceiling, they're hidden by carpeting and maybe a subfloor. We have no idea where the bones are, how big they are, or how they're put together. Why would we say this building has good bones? Yet realtors do it all the time. I see realtors still to this day have listings where they'll talk about quality construction throughout. You can't possibly know if the house is well built on a visual inspection. You can't. It may look good, but all you're seeing is the paint and the carpet. So if you say quality construction throughout, or this house has good bones, and it turns out that the house actually is very poorly built, you have committed negligent misrepresentation. Now, I'm going to bet, and I don't want to show of hands, that in this room, almost everybody here has, even Nancy, my dear friend, even has committed negligent misrepresentation in your career. Now, you didn't do it to hurt anybody. Your heart was pure, but you did it not realizing you were doing it. Now, did you get sued? No, thank God. Most of the time, the buyer doesn't realize they could potentially hold you liable, and they don't go to a lawyer who knows the law and knows that you could be held liable for it. Now, it's real easy to prevent yourself from committing negligent misrepresentation ever again. Here's the clue. Don't talk about what you can't see. You know what, realtors? Your clients are not buying a house because it has good bones. What gets them excited? Wow, look at that kitchen. Look at that master bath suite. Oh my God, that sunken tub, that is fabulous. Honey, look at this. Okay, that's what gets them excited, right? They're not getting excited because of the good bones. So focus on what your clients can see and what you can see. Nobody's going to claim you misrepresented that because they can see what you're looking at. Look at that great room, how it connects onto the kitchen. Wow, you could really have some great gatherings here of your family. Oh my goodness, yes, I love this house, I love this house. When you say it's well built or good bones, your clients don't know what that means either. So why say it? So stick to what you can see and you won't ever commit negligent misrepresentation again. And don't ever pass along hearsay, okay? Because you may think it's gospel and it may be from your best friend, okay, but they're not going to be the ones that get sued when you tell them that, oh yeah, Tom Cruise is buying the property next door. Okay, so that's negligent misrepresentation. The third variety, and this is more commonly asserted against you in the profession, is breach of fiduciary duty. You are fiduciaries to your clients. You have duties that go beyond just being careful. You have to be totally loyal to your clients. And this comes up in a bunch of different ways. And we could have another seminar talking about the risks of dual agency. We could talk about the risks of having a large brokerage and having one agent, the listing agent, and the other agent in the same office as the selling agent. But as I said, I've only got an hour and a half, and I've only got about 10 minutes of that left, so I'm not going to be able to do that today. But you have to keep in mind that the law requires that you have complete loyalty to your client. I just finished settling a lawsuit where my client was selling a piece of property worth several $1 million, commercial property. And the broker represented both sides in this commercial transaction. The escrow period came and went. My client, the seller, said, well, this person has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 1031 exchange that has now failed, and I don't want to sell to them anymore. The broker started working with the buyer to pressure the seller to continue through with the sale. And worse yet, there were emails that ultimately went to the seller and to me, where I could see in the emails the broker was taking the side of the buyer against the seller. Now this broker got off easy. All he had to do was discount his commission a little bit. The transaction did finally go through after a lawsuit was filed and a mediation. But my point is, you have to keep in mind to be very, very careful to be loyal to your client and not to take sides if you're a dual agent. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. Your obligations as a fiduciary are also to disclose anything you know. Not just from this transaction, by the way. You may have dealt with this property 10 years ago, and you may remember that there was a fire in this property back in 1978. Well, the fact that you know that knowledge from somewhere else doesn't mean that you don't have to disclose it here. Knowledge is knowledge. Facts are facts. If you know anything significant that might affect the buyer's decision to buy, you need to disclose it. So let's go into some other myths here. The curb appeal or banana peel topic, what I'm saying there is, remember folks, that curb appeal is not the same as quality construction. Cover that. But let me go into a couple of myths about fraud that are very dangerous for all of you. The myth of as is. There is a myth out there that we lawyers just cannot stamp out. And it's that as long as it's as is, then I don't have to worry. Good morning. As long as it's as is, we don't have to worry about non-disclosure claims against us or against the seller, because it's as is. And now CR has amended the RPA several years ago. As you know, we have as is back in the RPA contract, right? So see, we're fine. It's as is, we don't have to worry about it. That's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. The as is clause in the contract only protects the seller, not the listing agent or the selling it. It only protects the seller from warranty liability. Warranty liability is promise liability. So if I say to the buyer, I the seller, I say, well, look, the dishwasher works great, and the contract says the house is as is. Then when the dishwasher breaks the next week, they can't sue me, the seller, for breach of warranty. So as long as I didn't know that the thing was going to break or that it had problems, I, the seller, am protected by the as-is clause. There's a whole other source of liability to the seller and to you, the professional. And that is liability not based on contract, but based on tort. Okay? Contract is, I agree to sell you this house and you agree to buy it for a stated price. Tort is, I walk out of the building and I have a right to expect that everybody driving in that parking lot is going to drive safely. That's tort responsibility. Okay? Has nothing to do with contract. Well, fraud has nothing to do with contract. So as is does not affect your responsibility to disclose or the seller's responsibility to disclose one bit. You have to be just as careful as in the days when the RPA did not have an as-is clause. So please do not be lulled into a false sense of security. Another myth that I hear all the time is, well, there's a problem and this particular sale, it looks like it's going to fall through, but you know what, next time I list the house and next time we issue the disclosures, instead of disclosing the fact that there are some code violations in the backyard, we'll just say buyer to verify. Okay, now I don't want to show hands on this, but I'm going to guess there are good people in this room that have seen that happen, okay? If you know something is wrong or something needs to be disclosed with a property, and you cover it up by saying buyer to verify, you're almost circling the fact of your dishonesty. Now, I know you don't look at it as being dishonest because you're just saying, well, look, we're kind of highlighting, we're saying you better go check the permits. No, that's not enough. That's not enough. If you have knowledge of something wrong with the property, you or seller, you have to disclose it. Just saying buyer go look doesn't protect you. You have to tell them. And if it does come out later that you or your seller had the knowledge, and instead of telling the knowledge, you said, oh, buyer, better go check this, I'm hoping that they won't, okay? That makes you and your client actually look worse than if you'd said nothing at all. So buyer to verify only applies, that really only is helpful when you truly don't know okay, here's when. You list a property and you can tell that there's been an addition to this house, but your client didn't do it. And your client says, I assume that it's a legitimate addition, but I don't know. Now, you know that the law does not require you to go to City Hall and check permits. It doesn't require you to do that. But you see a red flag here. This is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. The whole street a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. But wait a minute, now there's a 4th bedroom added on to the back, and you can clearly see it was not original construction, right? We all know, right? We see this pretty much every day. Okay, now, that's when you say buyer to verify, okay? Not because you know it's illegal construction, but because you see the red flag, there's been some remodels here. We're not gonna go research it for you, but we're concerned, we wanna make sure that you check it out. That's the buyer to verify. Do never use buyer to verify as an excuse not to disclose everything you or the seller know to the buyer. That's just gonna cause trouble. The transfer disclosure statement. Now that is one of several disclosures that we're all using these days. The transfer disclosure statement is one that is required by the legislature. That is not optional. We have some other disclosures, the SSD, The seller's property questionnaire, the SPQ, those are not required by statute. But the seller's property questionnaire, listing and selling agents, you should be recommending that to your clients every single time. Your standard of care requires that you suggest your clients use the SPQ, buyer or seller. Now, they don't have to, they can ignore your advice, but make sure that you can document if they don't use the SPQ, that you have told that seller, hey, it's really in your best interest to make sure your disclosures are complete, and the seller property questionnaire helps you do that. And I know you don't want to do that, but I would just ask respectfully that you reconsider. Now, they still don't follow your advice. Now you proved that you met the standard of care. You told them you need to use that. Okay? All right. So we could talk about the transfer disclosure statement for 45 minutes, but we won't. The duty to inspect. Civil Code Section 2079 places on your back a bullseye, and I think I've talked to you about it in past years here. You have to not just be honest, but you have to go walk through, in and around, inside and outside the given property, and disclose anything that the reasonable realtor, being reasonably alert, would hear or see or smell, okay, in that visual inspection. And there's a lot of case law saying that that is also a duty of care and a duty of honesty. If you violate that, you're going to be sued not only for negligence, but for breach of fiduciary duty at the same time. So that's really important. I think a lot of realtors give the visual inspection short shrift because you say, well, we've got a fine home inspection service. Why do I need to worry? The home inspector is going to protect me. Well, there's a little problem, because Civil Code Section 2079 has nothing to do with home inspectors. It has everything to do with realtors. And if there's a problem, and God forbid the home inspector misses it, and you miss it because you weren't being careful, you're going to be sued based on your statutory responsibility. The home inspector may or may not be sued. They have a different standard of care than you do. So don't be lulled into false sense of security. Civil Code Section 2079 places a very, very important responsibility on you. You need to make sure that you do that very, very carefully, inside and out. Okay, does size of the home matter, and why can't I trust the assessor? Well, we have to ask ourselves two questions. Who is it that records the definition of real property in the County of Los Angeles? I gave you a rather big hint. The recorder. No, the recorder records the definition of real property. So they weren't very imaginative in the name, were they? Okay, but that's helpful, because in real estate we need to remember that the definition of the boundaries of property, and therefore the square footage, do not come from the assessor. The definitions come from the county recorder. The assessor does what? Hint, hint. It assesses. Okay, they're calculating for their own purposes the size of the lot, or the size of the condominium, or the size of the home on the lot. But that's for their purposes. They aren't connected to the recorder. They don't talk back and forth. So the assessor information is interesting, but it's not considered legally reliable. Now, how often is the assessor wrong? All the time. All the time. With condominiums, it's not a question of is the assessor wrong, it's just how wrong are they? Because the assessor, they measure condos not paint to paint, which 95% of condos are paint to paint, which means you have to exclude voids, load-bearing walls. You don't include balconies or porches. But the Board of Equalization trains assessor staff to measure corner to corner. So condos are almost always going to be exaggerated by the assessor. And I guarantee you, you're going to have clients that buy condos, and someday they're going to buy carpeting, or they're going to, for some reason, do a measurement, or they're going to get their own appraiser. And appraisers know how to do this right. Appraisers will measure paint to paint. Do you have any appraisers in the room? Yeah, okay, am I right? Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So I've got my pros here backing me up on this. They're the ones that are going to finally tell that condo buyer, oh my goodness, you didn't buy what you thought you got. And then the real problem is, for me, in my HOA law hat, is I come to an HOA meeting where somebody stands up and says, hey, my CCNRs say I have a 1,900 square foot condo, and I'm paying my assessments based on 1,900 square feet. But my appraiser just measured it out, and it's 1,720. So where's my discount? Yeah, that's a lot of fun trying to handle those meetings, right? So I pretty much can guarantee your condos are going to be overstated. What about the situations where sometimes a property, the assessor has the square footage less than what is actually there? You look at you have one of those rare clients that actually looks at their appraisal report before they close escrow. Oh, those are wonderful, smart people. And they see, oh my goodness, the assessor says it's 1,800 square feet, but the appraiser says it's 2,250. Red flag, right? Now the red flag is different, because what's happened here almost certainly is there's been an addition at some point in time. It was not run through the building department. The building department therefore did not tell the assessor, and the assessor still thinks it's 450 feet smaller than it really is. Okay, red flag, there's been an illegal addition almost certainly on that one, okay? We can't trust the assessor. And when we quote the assessor information and we allow clients to believe that that is official or reliable, we could be right in the middle of a negligent misrepresentation situation. Now, I'm not saying don't use the assessor's information. That's the only stuff we've got until the expert appraiser measures it out. But until you get the appraisal report, you've got to make sure your clients understand assessor information is interesting, but it's not legally considered the official measurement of a property. And if your clients understand that, then they won't be quite as upset when they find out the condo is smaller than they thought it was. Okay? So a very, very dangerous issue in terms of negligent misrepresentation and upset clients. Here's another issue that relates to condominiums. A lot of times I talk to realtors where they're, as part of their marketing strategy, they get on the board of directors of their own condo association. Okay, they want to farm a particular building, kind of makes sense. Well, I should be on the board, I want everybody to know who I am. Here's an issue though, is as a board member of an association, you're going to have a lot of knowledge the average homeowner in that association does not have. Now guess what happens to your responsibility to disclose all that information? True story, had a realtor in, I guess it doesn't matter, in Arcadia about 15 years ago who was on the board of directors. And they had sold a home in their HOA, and it turned out that the board of directors had been struggling for many years with plumbing problems in their building. But it hadn't risen to a point where they had talked to all the homeowners about it. There was no loan, no construction in progress, but it was a big issue that was going to be coming. Now this realtor, because of being on the board, knew that, and they didn't tell the buyer that. Well, who would have thought, right? Who would have thought you would give them inside information? But you had the inside information because you're on the board of directors. So be very, very careful. If you're going to farm an association and also be on the board of directors, your disclosure obligations are through the roof. I would really suggest respectfully that if you're going to farm an HOA, you really shouldn't be on that board. You don't want the inside information because you'll have to pass that inside information along. Is that harsh? Okay, it may be harsh, but it's my best advice for you. I really wouldn't want you in a situation where somebody says you withheld valuable information that if I knew I would not have bought in that building. Okay, last minute revelations, the hanging chads. Do you remember wasn't it the Bush-Gore presidential election? And we had those last minute ballots where the judge had the big magnifying glass and they were looking at the little pieces of chads, little punched out paper. Right? And they're trying to analyze whether that was really a vote or whether that was accidental. Well, you know what? In real estate transactions, we have hanging issues all the time, very late in the day. 2 days before close of escrow, all of a sudden, you become aware that there's an inspection of the property that has not yet occurred. The city of Temple City, I think, requires inspections before you change, or is it El Monte? Thank you, El Monte. So El Monte hasn't done their inspection yet. It's 2 days before close. So the buyer says, oh, don't worry about it. Let's just close. We'll have the inspection afterwards. So they have the inspection after close, and a couple of problems come up. The buyer hits the roof. And what's the first thing they say? You, the realtor, didn't tell me that I should close escrow after the inspection, and you were hiding these issues from me. That's an actual case that actually happened to one of your members. He's not in the room. So, but I won't say anything beyond that. That was an actual case that we had to help settle because the escrow was about to close. Everybody was excited. They were in a rush, and the El Monte inspection had not yet occurred. And the buyer said, "Oh no, we need to move in. We need to move in." And so the realtor trusted the client. Huh? Yeah. Okay. They shouldn't have trusted the client because, sure enough, about a month later, a lawsuit. oh my goodness, you had us closed, you didn't tell us about these illegal conditions, and we want to rescind the transaction, and we want our money back, and we want damages, and blah, blah, blah. And so $10,000 of attorney's fees later, we finally got the thing settled. But it all could have been prevented by, at the last minute, instead of rushing to close and not having everything documented and clean, they left something hanging. And that hanging thing wound up biting that particular realtor really, really badly. Another thing that happened in the South Bay, escrow is about to close. The day before escrow is closing, the loan is going to fund at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock the next morning. And in the middle of the day before, the selling agent finally gets a very late disclosure from the listing agent about a city inspection. I think it was in the city of Lomita. And it turned out that there was an addition to this house that was never permitted. So now it's 15 hours before escrow is to close. The selling agent is in possession of a pretty damaging piece of information. What does the realtor do? Here's what the realtor didn't do. She didn't immediately start sending emails and faxes and phone calls and immediately ask the listing agent to postpone the closing and call the lender and say, we're going to postpone the closing of the funding of this loan because we've had a last minute issue. The realtor panicked and froze. So the transaction closed, and then the buyer found out about this problem the next day because he wasn't home that afternoon. And then we had a very uncomfortable situation where both the listing and the selling agent, I was representing the listing agent, the broker, the selling agent, the listing agent had a different lawyer, and the homeowner, the buyer, was sitting there. He didn't even need a lawyer. He knew he didn't need a lawyer because he knew he had the realtors dead to rights. So what we wound up doing was we said, well, how much is it going to take, do you think, to make this right? We did a little research, all of us, and figured out it was going to be $30,000 or $40,000. And the two brokerages split it and paid that guy every penny. And you know what? That was the best deal we ever made. But again, because we were going to lose that case. We were going to lose that case. Because the selling agent didn't alert the buyer, oh, by the way, there's some disclosures that we haven't received yet from seller. And then worse yet, she froze and didn't put off the funding, didn't try to extend the escrow. Didn't do everything she could to protect the buyer. So we were going to lose that case. So that was the best deal we ever did. But it all could have been prevented by when those last minute things happen, document the situation. And if you know that everything's not complete in the file and it's a couple days before close, you've got an obligation to alert buyer and ask for an extension. Here's another one that happens on the buyer side, and I'll wrap it up with this, is I have people come to me all the time and they'll say, okay, well, escrow is going to close in 2 weeks. We just found out that there was a fill in the blank. There was a lawsuit on the property, there was a defect on the property, something we just found out. And they didn't tell us in any of the disclosure statements. So can we go ahead and close escrow and then sue them? Well, no, because now you know, right? Again, for buyers, knowledge is knowledge. So once you know about it, you really should probably see a lawyer at that point. You really should. Most of your clients aren't going to do it, right? What? I'm going to spend $500 to talk to that Richardson guy? No way. Okay? Okay, fine. Okay. But you know you recommended it. So what should they be doing? Well, you've got a choice now, client. Either you rescind the transaction, you ask for another extension of the close of escrow so we can sort this out, or you accept the problem and close and know that you're not going to be able to do anything about it. Bottom line, a lot of our clients think that they can take those last minute disclosures and use them as weapons later. Well, no, once you find out about it, you know. So watch out for those last minute discoveries on either side. They can really cause a problem. And again, they can leave you exposed when you were not dishonest. You didn't do anything wrong except leaving yourselves exposed, but yet now all of a sudden you're being accused of fraud, which is very upsetting. And very damaging to your reputation if it goes into a lawsuit, because now that's a public record. So those lawsuits are often settled because they're dropped, they're dismissed, they're thrown out of court, but nobody ever hears about that. Oh, did you hear Kelly was sued for fraud? They never hear that Kelly's lawyer got it thrown out 4 months later. They just hear about the fraud. And that's why integrity and the F word, this F word, is so much more dangerous and so much more damaging to you. So be careful, be prudent, and be successful. Thanks for having me this morning.